Welcome to this week's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Today is actually one of our special member spotlight episodes, and I am happy to have Pam Aulson on the episode. Pam, if you have not come across Pam in our group, she is our expert on college housing, and I'm so happy to have her here to give some tips about how you can also be renting your rental properties to college students. So Pam, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. It's really great to be here. Thank you, Becky, for inviting me.
Yeah, I would love if you would just to start off to tell our listeners a little bit about who Pam the woman is to start with.
Okay, my background is actually home sewing, home economics, and art. And I used to work for the magazines in New York City. It was really exciting. And Vogue Butterick Pattern Company and all the companies, McCall's, Simplicity. I've written a lot of books, craft books, quilting books. And that's really my background. But then when I had started having children, I had to do something else. I used to design kits for Better Homes and Gardens. And it's always along the craft lines. And presently, for the last 22 years, I've been the arts and crafts director for the city of Glen Cove during the summer. So crafts and sewing sounds corny. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
I agree. I think everybody loves a little DIY kind of project now and again, right? So
Right.
I'm also, I feel like oddly enough, that kind of does fit with like real estate investing, where we're always creating and coming up with new projects and seeing what we can kind of do next. So oddly enough, it kind of goes hand in hand. But how did we get then from home ec to then real estate empires here?
Well, I had one son who decided to go to Utica College, and really the first parent meeting, we were at breakfast with another set of parents, and we were looking at the penny savers saying, do you believe these prices? It's like you can't buy a pile of dirt in Long Island for these prices. And the other person saying we should buy a house and make Terry and Dan the landlords. And at first we were hesitant, but I don't know, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it was a great idea. But it actually took me until he was going into his senior year to find something and pull the trigger. And once we did, we were off and running. And my son easily filled the first house with his friends, but he had belonged to a fraternity. For the next couple of years, I had just on, word of mouth. That was the best. The house is just filled up. So that's the important part. It immediately made it profitable. So
now, when you planned on buying that first property, was it really just, let's just buy the one, let's just make it easier for my son, let's give him a place? Or were you kind of like, hey, there's some money in this college housing?
Once the money started rolling in, I said, this is great. And we put a lot of money into our first house. We put new windows in. That was, $6,000 right there. 10 grand for the electric. And what happened is an opportunity 2 houses away came up, and they already had new windows in. So I'm saying, I'm going to save $6,000 right there. So I started working, and I was able to pick up, another house, 2 houses over. And without really thinking about it, again, that became immediately profitable with my son helping fill the house. And one other thing, my houses are 1 mile from the college. So especially when gas prices go up, I add in my ads, walk to school. And they kids do, they scoot on their scooters or they rollerblade, and it's funny. So anyway, so it just evolved because houses became more available. And then there was a house in between where the man went to a rest home. And so actually I was helping on that. I fixed the sidewalk in between my 2 houses, and we used to pick up the sticks and the garbage on his, just to keep the neighborhood nice. And one day he just called me from the rest home and said, do you want my house? And I said, sure. Why not? So it just kept evolving. And most of my houses are close together. So it really works out.
So when did you buy the first one, Pam?
It's about 14 years ago. And
okay.
And then it just really kept going from there. And I picked up a few more houses along the way.
That was gonna be my next question. Now, 14 years later, how many houses do you have in that area?
I have 7 houses. 5 of them are right together. 4 are next door to each other, and one's across the street,
Wow.
and 2 more around the corner. So I can walk to all my houses. And what's convenient is if I need a screwdriver or the lawnmower or and I just go into one garage and grab it. That's been beautiful, having them close together.
Yes. I actually, as many of our listeners know, I have 2 properties right across the street from each other. And I know it sounds so simple, but I love the fact that I only need one hammer, one ladder, right? I could just take things right across the street from each other, and it just makes maintenance just so much easier. So
Definitely.
I love the fact that you can do that with now even more houses on the same street. So, and are these single family houses or multifamily houses?
Most of them are 2-family houses, and one of them was a 2-family house, but it functioned as a one. So I made it one. It saves me a little bit in some taxes and just some fees, and it makes it easier. And then, so out of the 7 houses I have, only one is a 1-family house.
Okay. And the rest are all duplexes.
Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So then it sounds like, I love at the beginning, it was nice and easy with your son being in school and having his friends, who's moving into this. And it sounds like you were really able to find your students through word of mouth. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. And then
Gotcha.
I put up posters at the school, and I always put little footprints like walk to school. My houses are a mile away. And I've been competitive with my prices, and through that, and I do advertise on Craigslist with success. I try some of the other methods, but for me, up in this area, Craigslist has worked out. I know it's not always the best for some other people, but it's working for me.
Good. So that's what I was going to ask. So let's talk about how we then find these college students, right? So first question on that, do you exclusively rent to college students, or if another adult that was not in school wanted to live there, would you rent to them? Or do you advertise solely for college students?
In my ads, I put college housing, and I definitely get a lot of calls from families, but there are a couple of issues. One, lead is a big issue, particularly upstate. My houses are all prior to 1920, and lead is a huge issue. I had an issue in my own home when I had my twins. Their blood levels were high. The pediatrician reported me. I was fined. They kept, my house is 1911. So I'm very careful about the lead issue. And I mean, frankly, I only want to rent to college students because that's my business. But when families do ask, I'm not able to rent to people because of the lead issue. That's one thing right there. And, I don't want to appear to be discriminatory or anything, but I really only intend to stay with the college students. And it also doesn't work out. Like if I have a duplex, it would not work out to have a family on one floor and students it just would not work out. So
I so have to share this then. So last night for our listeners was actually the Lady Landlords holiday party in New York, and Pam was in attendance there. My husband and I came home, and as many of our listeners know, my husband and I have a duplex, and we have above us, we actually have college students. We came home exhausted from the party because that we've been planning and setting up for so long now. And last night, our college boys apparently decided that they needed to have a beer pong tournament, right? It was the exact night. And it's not, and it was just something that, my husband and I, usually we don't hear them and they usually don't bother us, but it was just so funny last night that I could definitely see then that also being an issue, having family there saying, well, the family with small kids, they got to get to bed, adults got to get to work in the morning, might not necessarily want to live in also what's kind of a fraternity house sometimes, right?
Exactly. And the kids are I know, because the kids are just finishing their exams. Probably all my college students are having the parties, although they want to get home for holidays. So, but
yes,
I know when to time it. My kids actually have given me tons of advice on what to do and when when they're going to party and when they're not going to party when they're studying.
That's really helpful. Now, when you advertise, when you mentioned putting up flyers, which I think is a fantastic idea, or do you contact the school itself and say, hey, I have housing right next to it? Do you just kind of walk around and put it up on bulletin boards? How does that work to have that connection with the school, if any at all?
Yes, the one college that I usually post the most at is Utica College, and they actually only let me post 2 posters. And I have to go to the housing office and they have to stamp it to approve it. And I believe it can only stay up for 3 weeks, but after 3 weeks, I can go and replace it. And I can have my contractor or someone go and replace it for me. And that has worked pretty well. And what I really do like, even though I have duplexes, I like it when a whole team comes to me, 6, because most of them are 3 and 3. I like it when one group comes to me for the whole house, because then it resolves parking issues and other issues, you know. So
Well, that's what I was going to ask about next. Now that you're kind of advertising it, I would love to have you share a little bit about how you structure this. Meaning, do you rent out the full house? Do we rent by room? Do we rent by semester? So let's kind of break that down. So how do you usually advertise it? Do you advertise then as, you know, the full apartment, or do you do by room?
First of all, I advertise, it's a 2-semester agreement. And I get many people that come. So I would rather choose a group of, 5 or 6 people that come together. But I do charge by the room. And, once in a while, things go a little sour and one will drop out or something. So I do not penalize the other students. Some of my other, people that I know, they'll suddenly change the rent to get, for that 3rd bedroom that's empty. But I don't do that. I'm getting a really nice price for each bedroom, probably more than most people. I know that I'm getting more than most people. So it just works out. It works out nicely.
So do you have a lease separate for each person?
Yes, I do. And I
Okay.
know some landlords give one lease and have everybody sign it because, again, I have college kids. While I've been doing this, I've had 3 college kids going through at the same time because I have a set of twins and 2 other kids going through. So I know a lot about lease agreements for college kids.
Mhm.
But I have each person sign their lease. I didn't like it when my daughter on 2 occasions stayed where there were 12 kids and the lease would say, oh, if one person leaves and everybody has to chip in. I didn't like that. So I decided not to. And they all had to sign, all 12 had to sign the same lease. They were huge houses in Binghamton. But anyway, back to
Wow.
mine. I just have every parents sign, and I have them initial every page because that's supposed to make them read it.
Or at least it'll acknowledge it in court that they
Right.
confer that they said they read it. They actually did
Right.
or not, that's then on them, but at least you're protected by having them initial every page.
Right.
Smart.
And so far it's worked out great. The parents are responsible as well as the student. And
Okay.
honestly, in 14 years, I've had very little problems. Even through this pandemic, I'm very grateful that everybody's paid.
Yeah.
So that's
I
important.
think that's helpful. And also, since you're doing it by the room, I think it's a little bit more manageable for them, the parents, to say, well, I don't have to worry about paying for that, covering the whole apartment. I'm just paying for the room. So I think that's also much more affordable and probably has really helped you also through this pandemic. Now,
I think, oh, yeah.
you had mentioned that that you do 2 semesters. So when does your lease start and when does your lease end?
I let them in about a week to 10 days early so they can get settled. And honestly, I end it like a day after they finish because they want to get out of there anyway. And we super clean it. And during the summer, I have been able to rent to summer interns, but just like even one tenant per floor. So if this is a 3-bedroom apartment, I don't mind if I just have one tenant because I'm 5 hours away. I cannot have my houses empty. And there are squatter situations up in Utica, which is where my houses are. And so I've never been without tenants. I have travel nurses, I have professionals. Some of the best summer people are construction workers. People like say, what? But they work 10, 12-hour days. They go to work at 5:30 in the morning. They come home. They do takeout food. They don't mess up my stove. And they've been fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And,
Okay, that was actually going to be one of my questions, was then since you're semester to semester,
right.
do you just leave it empty? So that's interesting then that you use these other types of just shorter term leases for
Right.
that time. Gotcha.
Right.
And then what would happen if one of the students wanted to stay there for the summer? Does that
Yes.
ever happen?
Yes, it sure does. And I work it out. I give them a lower rate during the summer, and I try to get at least two in an apartment. So
Okay.
even if, a lot of times, of course, people do renew. So if someone has to stay during the summer, I try to get them to get another friend that is also around for the summer. And since I have a nice reduced rate, that's been pretty easy. And that works out. So, they're really, even though it's a duplex and I usually rent to a group of six, I'll just give them one apartment. So for example, if one from the first and the second floor want to stay for the summer, I make them move in together, and then I have the other apartment to rent.
Now, with that, if you kind of then have two people on the upper and lower parts of a duplex, let's say, and then now for the summer, you're going to combine them and put them in one unit. Do you furnish the common areas, or are they responsible for that?
Well, in the early days, I didn't furnish them, but over the years, people have left so much furniture. I am up to here with desks, sofas, coffee tables, little side tables. Because when they graduate, they're out of there. They're off to California or wherever. So at this point, I have a ton of furniture. My garages are full of furniture. I'm starting to put things out to the curb. So anyway, and the other thing is during the summer, if they do renew, I let them lock things up, because my rooms all have locks, individual locks. They can lock their things up, and this way, even and if they're going to renew and they're not there this summer, I make them vacate one of the rooms and lock their things up in the other two rooms, and then I put one summer intern in. But really, that would only be a 2-year stint at the most. But a lot of times I really only have a 1 year, but I don't mind the short-term rental. I clean the places really well, and I don't mind short-term. People seem to like longer term, other landlords seem to like longer term, but I don't mind short-term rentals. It works out.
Short-term. Now, if you have somebody that now rented for the 2 semesters and they're going to go home for the summer, but then they plan on coming back, I love that you have the locks on the doors. Yeah. So if someone says, hey, I'm going to be back in August and I'm going to lock my stuff up, do you charge for them to store their things during the summer?
I don't, because especially if they're renewing, I'm really making a very nice amount of money. And I'm just being a nice landlord in that case. And as I said, because I get some income from the extra room, it's not a problem at all.
You don't necessarily need it. And if they're a great tenant and they're coming back, that's something that makes sense for you to do financially, because it's kind of like you're charging that premium for the two. Really, you're taking, a 10-month lease. You would be taking basically the rent that you'd be making in 12 months and condensing it down to 10 months. So if they need to then just be there and store their stuff for 2 months, it's great, because then they think they're getting a great deal, even though they paid you a premium for the 10 months. And then you also seem like the completely understanding landlord that you are. So it kind of works out in everybody's favor. So I like this strategy there.
I pride myself on being the awesome, I'm just not a landlady. I'm an awesome landlady, the awesome lady of down. And word of mouth is the very best way to get your people. And people know my houses because, again, they've been to a few beer pong parties. They know my houses. It's great. And they know about me. And so that's just worked really well, to keep things going.
That. Now, I have so many things I want to ask about here. Next topic that I kind of want to switch into is, you had mentioned that you always have the parents and the students responsible. Correct. So how can you tell us a little bit more about how that's worked with co-signers?
Honestly, it works great. Most of the time the parents do pay, but there are, of course, some students that rely on financial aid. And I have stipulations in my lease. If that's the case, first of all, they have to discuss it with me. And they have to give me a hefty amount before they move in. And then I know the date that financial aid comes in. It's usually around October 8th and February 12th. I'm there, ready for the money. So there's communication. It's important between who's paying the parent or the student. I would say most of the time the parents are paying.
Now, do you Do you run credit checks on both the student and the parents in these situations?
I do not.
Okay,
And I have not had any problems with, in 14 years, I have not had problems. It's,
gotcha.
students want to, they want housing and they pay,
Yeah.
parents pay. I even have had situations where some boys did something. They threw some beer cans at a next door neighbor and they broke some of her tiles. And the police said, look, this is a felony and you better fix this right away. Within minutes, they coughed up the money, to fix it, because they, one of them wanted to be a teacher and they don't want that anymore on their record. So I find they're very willing to take care of things. And that was a really big exception. But
Okay. That was actually the topic I was going to talk about next. One of the biggest things that you always hear with college housing is a lot of landlords being worried about parties, about destruction, about no cleanliness within the apartment. Have you experienced any of those things besides that one situation of throwing some beer cans? Have you kind of had that problem where all of a sudden you found out that there was a kegger at one of your houses?
oh yes, of course. I've had all those experiences. But
Okay.
at the beginning of the year, the police come and talk to all my tenants. And they
Oh,
basically said Utica does not, they don't go for these wild parties. And you better, keep things in line. And the neighbors will call the police if there's an issue. Halloween, there were a couple of issues. But it turned out it wasn't really my tenants. It was other people walking around that broke some windows and did some bad things.
wow.
Stole some pumpkins. And neighbors now all have things on camera. So,
That is true. That
and
changed. The security cameras have completely changed mischief for sure.
Exactly. As far as cleanliness, no, the parents come, they expect the white glove treatment. And I'm telling you, every edge of every cabinet of everything, we clean every inch. But the kids, they don't clean it all. The girls do. The boys, not a thing. In fact, one of my little secrets is I go up, I'm going up in January after the holidays, and I actually may squirt the stoves with easy off, and I'll clean the drains and I clean the dryer vents. I do a little, things here and there, but in May it comes, there'll be thick dust on all the baseboards. They don't clean at all unless something spills, but
Maybe if something spills, they might clean it up.
maybe. They like the string mops. I like the sponge mops. No,
So then you just wait till the end of the year to then just do a really deep cleaning at turnover
deep,
time.
super deep. Yeah, super, super deep. But the girls are better. I have to say the girls are darling. And I try so hard to get girls, but the girls seem to take their time thinking about it. Whereas the boys are like, you'll give us the whole house. They run to the ATM machine and give me the deposit in, minutes. So
That's interesting to see the difference. Yeah.
The girls are great. They'll put up lovely curtains and decorate. It's wonderful when the girls are there, and they will clean. Yes, the girls clean.
Okay.
Boys, not so much.
Okay. So that's good to know. So yes, they're college students. They're still going to have their parties, but you've never ended up in a position where there's been destruction to your property because of parties or anything like that.
Minor, I have to say. Okay, they've thrown people through walls, but a sheet of sheetrock is not that expensive, and I charge plenty. I charge them plenty for when they throw a person through the wall. But
Exactly.
It doesn't happen that often, but they do pay. I give them, just like every other landlord, an itemized bill at the end for labor and materials, and there's nothing to discuss really. I give them the bill and deduct the deposits so far have always covered everything. So
yeah,
that's been good.
Okay. I like you're actually leading me literally to the next topic that I wanted to talk about there. So talking about throwing people through walls and maybe kind of having some fights and things like that. Since you rent by the room, it's like you're in my mind here. Since you rent by the room, has there ever been a time when then people didn't get along? One person wanted to move out, you had to move in somebody else. And then now that kind of just changed the dynamic in the household. How do you kind of mitigate then those different personalities? And especially when sometimes your college students, this is the first time they've lived with people outside of their family.
Right. That does happen occasionally, but in the lease, it says that they're able to sublet. So I put the responsibility on them to find someone else. And honestly, in 14 years, I've only had about 2 cases of people doing that. And one time someone did, 1 or 2 times someone did find someone. And then of course I have to be compassionate. Sometimes a father will lose a job, or, somebody will be very, very sick in their family. So I have to be compassionate. But in some cases they're able to find someone else, and in other cases they're not. So I just kind of have worked it all in. And if it's in the middle of the year, I've at least collected, 1 semester. And so it's not a tremendous loss. So,
Yeah.
But if it's just a matter of they don't like the people anymore, or what's more typical is boyfriend, girlfriend, they want to go live with someone else. And in that case, I make them find someone else, and it's worked, and they have to sign a new lease, and that, works out.
Okay. And it sounds like you've been able to handle that really without too much issue. So that's great.
Not so much really after, considering I have about 35 tenants every year. Like, I don't know, I haven't had any lately, but it has happened over the years a few times. Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is really helpful to kind of just talk through. If you had started your portfolio all over again tomorrow, would you choose to go with college housing again? Or would you just kind of rent, to kind of whoever? Do you think you would still stay with the college town?
Absolutely, Becky. I'm rocking it. Okay. I'm really rocking. Yeah, it's much higher amount of money, and
Yeah.
and it's worth it. It's totally worth it.
Yeah. Now, what would you say is the best piece of advice that a new landlord would need to know if they're going to rent to college students?
It's really important to meet them, and try to meet them a couple of times, and find out as much as you can, like if they're on sports teams, or it's hard. It is hard when 6 smiling faces come to you and you're not sure if one of them's gonna, try to not pay. It's all about the not paying, because I want to be paid.
Yeah.
It's important. So, I discuss the money with them, like who's paying, is financial aid an issue? Again, even if they say it in general, when it comes down to before they move in, I need to discuss it again. The most important thing is getting paid. So that's the most important thing to discuss ahead of time and during the year. That's pretty much it, getting paid.
I love it. So it's really very much like what we would talk about for screening any tenants, right? We want to make sure that they have the ability to pay, and we understand and are very upfront with what our expectations are with that. That sounds really similar.
Right. And expectations, I send them a lot of emails about expectations prior to moving in, even though it's in the lease.
Okay.
I sort of word it differently, and it's easier for them to, my kids have given me advice. It's easier to swallow a little at a time. Like even to the point where when they move in, if they have futons, they need substantial furniture things underneath them. And what I allow on the walls, I allow the command things. I don't allow nails in my woodwork and walls. No. So, that's part of the expectations. And I go crazy over trash. I really have expectations about the week, it's in the lease, but I constantly, before they even move in, I say it's a health issue. It could attract rodents. When I was casual about it in the beginning, I had people that had trash bags up the wall, and the neighbors would call the Board of Health. So I put an end to that.
Oh, wow.
My husband came up with the idea of paying for the special blue bags that we have in Utica. And I'm a lunatic about the trash. They cannot store it in the basement or the garage or the attic. No, if you don't stay on it and emphasize things like that, they'll easily just get lazy and put their trash everywhere. And of course, it's a big problem. Big problem.
Exactly. And I thought I was laughing at your use of the word store, right? We should not be storing trash. We should be trashing trash, right?
Exactly.
So yes. And that apparently is is something that is definitely common amongst college students, is to just sit there and store their garbage rather than take it out. So that's interesting that that's one of the issues that you like to reiterate. What other types of either rules or guidelines do you feel then that you kind of give these students leading up to them moving in that wouldn't be typical for a long-term renter?
no smoking, or no vaping. They
Mhm.
they can do that outside. I don't care about it outside, but I also do not want cigarette butts. First of all, I'm fortunate that most of my tenants are in sports, so most of them do not smoke. But
Okay.
there's college kids smoke other things, as you know. I don't want any
I've heard.
butts.
I've
Yeah,
heard.
right. It's true. But anyway, I don't want anything in my house at all. And I emphasize that ozone machines would have to be rented and walls would have to be painted. I basically do a loony fit, and they believe me. I don't mind whatever they do on the porches, but I don't want any butts or residue anywhere. I don't want to be involved with that.
Of
So
course,
I
it's a lot of work and a lot of damage. Yeah,
yeah, I stress that. And honestly, they do comply. They're pretty compliant with that.
that's impressive. I'm happy to hear that.
Well, with 35
Um,
tenants a year, I gotta stress certain things.
Absolutely. Anything else that you feel like is a major kind of guideline that you give your college students when they move in?
Well, it's in my lease that nobody may stay more than 4 days. And, like I'm not always there. So I don't know how many times the girlfriends stay there, but girlfriends or boyfriends the other way around. But honestly, I haven't had people couch surfing and doing things like
Yeah.
that. I'm a little worried about it sometimes if I have extra room or something, but no, I haven't had an issue with that. I stress it. I said I'm renting by the room, and if anyone else is here, they need to pay. I act a
Yeah.
little loopy about certain things, and that's one of them.
But it sounds like, once again, you're setting your expectations really upfront and being very clear. And actually, that makes me think of a question. Who pays utilities?
Okay. Both. Either the parents many times have come to me and asked for all inclusive. So I
Okay.
up the price. I have a price point for all inclusive. And I also I actually encourage them to pay their own utilities because they're more careful with utilities when they pay for them. And I'm actually, I put a limit on water. Most landlords do cover water, but water in Utica is the most expensive in the country. And the sewer part of all things just went up 18.9%. And the sewer is as much as the water. So
Wow.
this falls under expectations. I've been paying up to $200 on the water, but I've noticed now landlords are expecting the tenants to pay the water because the water bill, especially if they're sloppy and let a toilet leak, that's part of my instructions too. I teach them how to listen for running toilets. So water's been a big issue over the years. I once received a bill for $1,330 for a 3-month period.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I know. I went to the water company and they did help me out, but I can't have tenants be sloppy about the water. So that's something I'm very, very attentive to. I teach them how to turn it off a running toilet and
Yeah.
I do send them a bill. As it comes in every 3 months, I let them know what the bill is. So as I said, if they exceed the 200 per, they pay it. But
Okay.
that's sort of working out.
Huh. I like that. Okay. That's very helpful. So those are some tips about what we want to make sure that we are thinking about ahead of time. Can you share what you would consider like a big red flag for a situation with your college students, or when you're screening your tenants? Like, what's something that you're just like, nope, this is not a good sign?
I would say that's very, very, very difficult because again, when 5 or 6 of them coming with a smile on their face, very, very difficult to figure that out. But again, I've been, if they're on a sports team, I also have the coach. The coaches have told me if they give you problems, let us know. And the police know that if they're on a sports team, that they'll go to the coach. That's been kind of a backup. It's very hard to pick out the red flags. I can say once basketball players come and one of them in particular was just, I don't know. I didn't like him, but I needed to rent the place and I rented it. And sure enough, they were horrible. One of the 3 snuck out, in the middle of the night after, one semester. And then they left the apartment in worse shape than usual. And also the first weekend that they were there, they went and put a folding chair on the roof, and they were drinking beer on the roof. Actually, that's it. My kids told me, put that in your lease. No going on the roof. College kids like to go on the roof and drink beer. No, you could die. No.
Yes, I have heard that. I've seen that when I visited friends' colleges when I was younger, but I always thought that was just such an odd, I went to school in a city, so I guess maybe I kind of missed out on that experience. But
No.
I have definitely heard this, put chairs or couches on a roof.
Right.
So, okay.
Oh, it's in my lease. And I reiterate, it's in my lease. No.
The things we have to put in leases, right? No couches on roofs. Like, who would have thought that that would be something
Right.
we'd have to think about? But
Right.
guess we do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's helpful there. So last thing that I wanted to just kind of address too is I know that then now you are in a position to be helping other landlords work with college housing, and you do have a Facebook group as well of for people that are specifically looking to rent to college students. So I'll make sure for our listeners to link that group of yours for our listeners here. But can you just kind of share a little bit about what you like other people to kind of learn from that group and how you like to be able to help other landlords that are renting to college students?
All right. That's why I started, because I think there are a lot of very unique things about renting to college students. And I thought that I would have a lot of advice, and I was hoping that, to build the group and have each other, help each other. So,
Yeah.
But really, I mean, we've talked about some of the very unique things, and certainly there are more unique things with college kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. I really want to help other people with college rentals, because I think it's fantastic, to tell you the truth. And
Yeah.
again, so grateful that I came flying through these last 2 years of the pandemic with everyone paying, no problems at all. So
Yeah.
that's a real plus.
No, I agree. And once again, as somebody else that rents to college students, I will say it is a very unique kind of subset to be able to rent into, with just different kind of concerns and things to have to pay attention to. But same thing, when even with my college students, their school was actually shut down and went virtual. Well, all the boys were kind of like, well, I can go home and go be with my parents, or I can live through the pandemic with my friends. So a lot of them then still decided to choose that. And the parents, once again, were perfectly happy to continue to pay and have their kids out of their house.
And actually, Becky, last year, the schools were shut down. And the only thing that I had to do in the places where I was paying the all-inclusive, I had to get them better internet, and I had to get 2 per house, whereas I usually only get 1 very high speed for 1 house. But they were all taking their classes online. They all wanted to be together. And they even when they were looking at the houses, the parents came to look, and they said the kids, they knew about the pandemic. They said they want to be together. We're going to go ahead with it, even though the pandemic. So yeah, again, I'm grateful that things worked out. But all the kids were taking their classes online from the houses last year.
Mhm.
Everybody.
Yeah, same with ours. So no, it's really great that even just kind of looking into what's kind of changing in our world, and with more virtual classes, that this is still a great opportunity to be able to make money and to serve our communities. So Pam, thank you so much for spending your time with me today and sharing so many tips about how our listeners can rent to college students. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. It was fun. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. And for all of our listeners out there, do make sure that if you are listening on your podcast, or if you are watching this on YouTube, to make sure to hit that subscribe button so you will get notified when we release our next episode, which comes out every Tuesday. Thank you very much for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast.